The crackle of the fireplace was the loudest sound in the room until my sister-in-law said, "No room for your stinky country kids at this party," and the whole crowd laughed like it was cute. My 9-year-old daughter's eyes filled. My wife stared at me like I was the problem, and I made one phone call that changed every face in that house. I'm Tom Harlan. I'm 56 years old, born and raised just outside Waterloo, Iowa, the kind of place where you learn early that a man's word matters and you don't make a show unless you have to. Most folks around Cedar Falls know my family name, not because we're rich, but because we show up. We sponsor the pancake breakfast at St. Mark's. We donate supplies to the VFW fish fry. We plow snow for neighbors who can't do it themselves anymore. Quiet stuff, the kind nobody claps for. That night, nobody was clapping anyway. Marla Grayson's living room looked like one of those catalog spreads Denise used to circle with a pen. White stockings hung in a perfect row. Mantle decked with pine garland and little gold ornaments that probably cost more than my first truck. A real stone fireplace with a gas starter and logs arranged like a movie set. The air smelled like cinnamon and something sweet mulled wine, I think, mixed with that sharp bite of champagne. There were at least 30 people there, most of them Marla's crowd from Cedar Falls real estate folks. Bank folks. The kind of women who say darling in a way that sounds like they're stepping over you. A few men in quarter zips and loafers stood in clusters talking about interest rates and what the market's doing. Like they were the only ones who understood money. Denise fit in better than I did. She always had. She grew up in town, went to school with Marla's friends, knew the right jokes to laugh at. Denise was 49, still careful. She had on a red sweater that hugged her just right and earrings that caught the light every time she turned her head. She'd spent an hour getting her hair smooth like she was going on TV. I wore my best jeans and a navy blazer. I only pull out for funerals, weddings, and meetings with the county. Emma wore the blue dress. Denise picked out tights that itched and a little cardigan. Her hair was brushed so neat it made my chest ache because it was like we were polishing her up so she could be accepted. Emma didn't need polishing. She needed protecting. We'd barely gotten our coats hung when Marla swooped in, glass in hand, smiling too wide. "Tom," she said, stretching my name like she was tasting it. "Well, look who finally made it out of the cornfields." I gave her a polite nod. "Evening, Marla." Denise laughed light quick. Marla stopped. Emma stood close to my side. I felt her fingers slip into my palm the way they used to when she was little and scared of the dark. Marla leaned down to Emma's height with that fake sweetness grown women use when they're performing kindness. "And you must be Emma. My goodness, you're getting so big." Emma smiled because she's a good kid. "Hi." Marla straightened and glanced around the room like she wanted an audience. Then she said it, not loud like a scream, louder than a whisper, the exact volume meant to land. "There's no room for your stinky country kids at this party." For a split second, I didn't understand what I'd heard. Like my brain refused to accept it, came out of an adult's mouth in a room full of adults with expensive haircuts. Then the laughter started, little bursts at first, like fireworks far away. A couple women covered their mouths. One man snorted into his drink. Someone said, "Oh my God," Marla, like she'd told a daring joke. Emma's hand tightened around mine so hard I felt her fingernails through my skin. Her face went still, like she was trying to hold her feelings in place. Her eyes didn't. They filled up fast, shiny under the tree lights. "Dad," she whispered, barely moving her lips. "I'm okay." That was the moment my throat closed. Denise didn't look at Emma first. She looked at me, and the look wasn't sympathy, it was warning. "Don't make a scene, Tom. Don't ruin this. Don't embarrass me." Denise's smile turned stiff, the kind you wear in family photos when you're mad, but you refuse to show it. She tipped her chin down like she was looking at her drink, and I realized she was avoiding Marla's eyes. Avoiding Emma's, too. Like if she pretended it didn't happen, it could slide right off. Marla lifted her glass as if she'd just toasted world peace. "Relax," she said, waving her hand. "I'm kidding. You know I'm kidding." Nobody said that's not funny. Nobody said that's a child. The only sound was the fire popping one sharp crack that suddenly felt too loud, like even the room itself knew it should be ashamed. I felt heat behind my eyes, not tears, rage, the kind that makes you see bright spots. But I didn't yell. I didn't lunge. That's not who I am. I've spent my whole life swallowing words for the sake of getting through it. I've done it at weddings and funerals, at family dinners, where Marla made little comments about my work boots, my truck, my simple life. I've done it because I didn't want Denise caught in the middle, because I told myself it didn't matter. 22 years ago at my wedding reception, Marla had leaned close to my mother, my mom who worked nights at Allen Hospital for 25 years, and said, "Isn't it sweet you people can dress up when you try?" I'd heard it. I'd seen Mom's face go tight, and I'd stayed quiet. That quiet had cost me more than I knew. I looked down at Emma. Her lashes were wet. She was trying to blink the tears away like she could undo them. Something inside me, some old habit of peacekeeping, reached for the same silence, for the same smooth smile. And then I pictured Emma growing up thinking this was normal, that she had to take it to be included, that her father would stand there and let people call her dirty because her grandpa lived outside town and we drove a used Ford instead of a Lexus. No. I squeezed her hand back. "Hey," I said softly close to her ear. "You didn't do anything wrong." Emma swallowed. "It's okay, Dad." "It's not," I said, still soft, still calm, "but I've got you." Denise's eyes snapped to mine again, sharp this time. "Tom," she murmured through her smile. "Please." Marla tilted her head. "Oh, don't start. It's a joke." I looked at the room. 30 faces, some amused, some uncomfortable. Most pretending they weren't seeing a little girl's tears because it was easier that way. Then I looked at the fireplace. The flames licked up the logs in steady orange waves, throwing warm light over Marla's perfect decorations. The whole room was cozy, safe-looking, like a Christmas card. And somehow it felt colder than any Iowa night I'd ever worked through. I didn't trust my voice in that living room. Not yet. I could feel the words boiling, the kind that come out wrong and give your enemy exactly what they want. Proof you're unhinged. Proof you're too sensitive. So I did what I've always done when something matters, when equipment breaks, when a contract gets messy, when a storm's coming. I stepped out of the room and handled it. In the hallway there was a row of boots, nice ones, clean soles. Coats lined up on hangers. A framed photo of Marla and her husband Brent standing in front of some beach resort, smiling like they owned the world. I reached into my blazer pocket and pulled out my phone. My hand didn't shake. My heart did. I scrolled to a number I hadn't called in a while, not since last winter when Ray Wilkins helped me untangle a mess with a vendor who thought he could stiff us. Ray was the kind of man who didn't talk a lot, but always knew who to call and what to say. He answered on the second ring. "Harlan," he said, like he'd been expecting me. "Ray," I said, keeping my voice low. "It happened tonight." He paused, the sound of a TV in the background muffled. "What happened?" he asked. I stared at Marla's beach photo and felt my jaw tighten. She said it, about my kid, in front of everybody. Ray didn't ask who she was. He already knew there was only one person who could push me to call at this hour. Another pause, longer this time. Then Ray said, "You want to walk away or you want to end it?" I closed my eyes for 1 second. In my mind, I saw Emma's wet lashes and her brave little lie, "Dad, I'm okay." I wanted to stop, I said, "For good." Ray exhaled slow. "All right," he said, "you still got the file." "No," I said, "but I know where it is." "Then pull it," Ray said. "And Tom, don't say a damn thing you can't prove." "I won't." "You sure?" I opened my eyes and looked down the hallway toward the living room, where the laughter had started up again, like nothing happened. "Yeah," I said, "I'm sure." Ray's voice got quiet. "Then you do exactly what we talked about years ago. Calm, clean, legal." I swallowed. "I'll see you tomorrow." "VFW," he said. "Noon fish fry prep. Bring your spine." I let out a breath that almost turned into a laugh, except there wasn't anything funny about it. "Yeah," I said, "I'll bring it." I ended the call and stood there for a moment, phone still in my hand, listening. From the living room, I heard Marla's laugh, sharp and pleased with itself. I heard the clink of glass. I heard the fireplace pop again. And for the first time in my life, the sound of that cozy crackle didn't feel warm. It felt like a fuse. I walked back into the living room with my face under control. Denise watched me like she was trying to read my mind. Emma's cheeks were damp, but she wiped them fast when she saw me, like she didn't want to give Marla the satisfaction. Marla lifted her brows. "Everything okay, Tom? Need a little air?" I looked at her then, at the family gathered around her smiling and sipping, and pretending this was normal. Then I looked down at my daughter. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't swear. I didn't threaten. I said one sentence plain as an Iowa winter. "This is the last party you'll ever host where my child gets treated like she's less than human." The room didn't explode, not yet, but the laughter stopped. Even the fireplace seemed too loud. The drive home was quiet in that way that feels heavier than shouting. Snow dusted the edges of the road, thin and dry, the kind that squeaks under tires instead of melting. Christmas lights blurred past the windows, blue and red and white smearing together like someone had dragged a wet finger across a painting. Emma sat in the back seat, buckled in her hands, folded in her lap. She stared out the window and pretended to be interested in the houses, counting inflatables like she always did. I knew that trick. I used to do it myself when I was a kid and didn't want my parents to hear me cry. Denise broke the silence first. "You didn't have to say that," she said. Her voice was low, tight. "You embarrassed me." I kept my eyes on the road. They embarrassed our daughter. Denise let out a sharp breath. Marla was joking. "You know how she is." "I know exactly how she is," I said. "That's the problem." Emma shifted in her seat. The seatbelt clicked softly. She leaned her head against the window like she was tired. Maybe she was. Maybe she just didn't want to hear us. Denise glanced back at her, then looked forward again. "Can we not do this right now?" she said. "It's Christmas." That line landed like it always did. It was the family version of "Don't rock the boat. We'll deal with it later." Except later had a habit of never coming. I pulled into our driveway, shut off the engine, and sat there for a moment with my hands on the steering wheel. The porch light clicked on automatically, bathing the front steps in a soft yellow glow. Our house wasn't fancy. Split level, vinyl siding, a porch that creaked in one corner no matter how many times I tried to fix it. But it was ours. Emma unbuckled and slid out of the car without a word. I grabbed her coat and followed her inside. She kicked off her boots and lined them up the way I'd taught her. That simple, careful habit nearly undid me. "Dad," she said quietly when Denise disappeared into the kitchen. "Did I do something wrong?" I knelt in front of her and shook my head. "No," I said. "You didn't do anything wrong. Not one thing." She studied my face like she was checking for the truth. "Okay," she said. Then she went upstairs to her room. Denise clattered dishes louder than necessary. I could hear cabinet doors opening and closing. I didn't follow her. I needed a minute. Maybe more than a minute. I went into the den and sat in my chair, the old recliner I'd had since before Emma was born. The leather was cracked, one armrest sagging where I always leaned. I stared at the dark TV screen and thought about the look on Marla's face when I said that one sentence. Not anger, not fear. Surprise. Like someone had finally spoken back in a language she didn't expect. That should have felt good. It didn't. Not yet. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and stared at Marla's name in my contacts. My thumb hovered over it. A big part of me wanted to call her, lay it out clean, man to woman, tell her she crossed a line and it wouldn't happen again. That's how normal adults handle things, right? I hit call. The phone rang once. Twice. On the third ring, I ended it. I set the phone down on the side table and rubbed my face with both hands. I knew exactly how that call would go. Marla would laugh it off, accuse me of being dramatic, maybe cry a little for effect. By morning, the story would be that Tom Harlan lost his temper at a party. Poor Denise married to such a difficult man. Emma would still be the kid who couldn't take a joke. I wasn't going to hand her that. Denise came into the den and stood there with her arms crossed. "Are you done?" she asked. "Done with what?" This she said, gesturing between us, making everything harder. I looked up at her. Really looked. I saw fear in her eyes, not anger. Fear of being on the outside. Fear of losing her place with her sister, her friends, her life in town. "I'm not trying to make things harder," I said. "I'm trying to make them right." She shook her head. "You don't understand how it works." I almost laughed. "I understand exactly how it works," I said. "It works because I've stayed quiet." She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Finally, she said, "I'm going to bed." I watched her go and felt the distance stretch between us like a crack in ice. That night, I didn't sleep much. I lay there listening to the furnace kick on and off the house, settling the wind brushing against the siding. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Emma's face, the way she tried to be brave for me. By morning, I knew one thing for certain: if I did nothing, I'd never forgive myself. The next day was gray and cold, the kind of Iowa winter day where noon feels like dusk. I spent the morning at the shop going through invoices and pretending to focus, while my mind kept circling back to one question. What leverage do I actually have? People think my business is simple. Storage units, equipment sheds, a couple of leased properties on the edge of town. Nothing glamorous. What they don't see is the paperwork, the contracts, the agreements tied to those properties, community use clauses, sponsorship arrangements, donor conditions that get renewed and forgotten year after year. I'm the one who keeps track of that stuff, always have been. Denise used to tease me about it. You and your files, she'd say. You don't need to know every detail, Tom. But details matter, they always have. At 11:30, I locked up and drove over to the VFW. The parking lot was half full, trucks dusted with snow. Inside, the place smelled like fryer oil and coffee that had been sitting too long on the burner. A couple guys were already setting up for the fish fry moving tables, arguing about where the extension cords went. Ray Wilkins sat at the end of the bar with a mug in front of him. Black coffee. 63 years old, gray hair, cut short hands like a farmer's, even though he spent most of his career behind a desk. He looked up when he saw me and nodded once. You look tired, he said. Didn't sleep much. He slid a mug toward me. That makes two of us. I wrapped my hands around the mug and took a sip. The coffee was bitter and perfect. So Ray said, not wasting time. You ready to talk? I told him everything. Not the emotional version, the facts. What Marla said. Where. Who was there. How Emma reacted. How Denise reacted. Ray listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When I finished, he leaned back and crossed his arms. You got witnesses, he said. Plenty. Witnesses who won't say anything, I said. Ray shrugged. Some won't, some will. Folks don't like being reminded they laughed at a kid. I stared into my coffee. I don't want to scorch the earth. Ray nodded. Good, because you don't need to. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a folded piece of paper, old and soft at the creases. You remember this. I frowned, then recognized my own handwriting at the top. An old sponsorship agreement. One I'd signed years ago on behalf of my family's business. I do, I said slowly. Ray tapped the page with one finger. Then you remember the conduct clause. My stomach tightened. I remember it exists, I said. I don't remember exactly what it says. Ray smiled just a little. That's why you keep files. I sat back, heart starting to pound, not with rage this time, but with something colder, something steadier. Ray leaned in. Here's the thing, Tom. This isn't about revenge. This is about standards, and standards don't care how loud someone laughs. I thought about Marla's party, the fundraiser she'd been bragging about, the church hall, the matching donations she loved to take credit for. For the first time since that night, I felt something like clarity. Okay, I said, what's my next step? Ray took a slow sip of his coffee. You go home, he said. You pull the file, and you don't do a damn thing until you read every line. I nodded, and then Ray said, you decide whether you're ready to stop being quiet. I went home with Ray's words sitting heavy in my chest. The sky was already dimming that flat winter gray, pressing down on everything. I parked in the driveway and sat there for a minute, listening to the engine tick as it cooled, reminding myself not to rush. Rushing was how you made mistakes, and mistakes were what people like Marla counted on. Inside the house was quiet. Denise was still at work covering an extra shift at the clinic. Emma's door was closed, music playing low inside her room, some pop song I didn't recognize. It was strange how life kept moving, even when something inside you had shifted. I went straight to the basement. There was a metal filing cabinet down there, old and dented, paint chipped around the handles. Denise hated it, said it made the place feel like an office. I kept it anyway. Inside were folders I'd been carrying forward for decades. Contracts, renewals, handwritten notes, clipped to printed pages. Stuff nobody else wanted to deal with once it was signed and forgotten. I slid open the bottom drawer and pulled out the folder marked Community Sponsorships, St. Mark's. It was thicker than I remembered. I sat on the basement steps and started reading, slowly, line by line. I wasn't looking for loopholes. I was looking for truth. The agreement dated back 15 years when my dad was still alive. He'd insisted on it being written clean, as he called it. Clear expectations, clear consequences. The church hall used the matching donation for fundraising events. The storage space we provided for tables and equipment, none of it was unconditional. It never had been. Halfway through the third page, I found it. Conduct clause. Language simple enough for anyone to understand. Community standards. No discrimination. No public behavior that brought harm or humiliation to others during sponsored events or gatherings tied to the agreement. I read it twice, then a third time. My name was on the signature line as the current sponsor representative. My chest tightened, not with triumph, but with the weight of it. This wasn't a trick. It wasn't some clever gotcha. It was something Marla had agreed to, something she'd never bothered to read because she assumed people like me didn't matter. I thought about the night of the party, about the room full of witnesses, about Emma standing there in her blue dress trying not to cry. I closed the folder and sat there for a long time. At dinner, Emma picked at her food. Denise asked about school. Normal questions, careful questions. Nobody mentioned Marla. Nobody mentioned the party. It hung over the table anyway, like smoke you couldn't clear out. After Emma went upstairs, Denise stayed at the sink longer than necessary, rinsing a plate that was already clean. "You've been quiet all day," she said finally. "So have you," I said. She dried her hands and leaned against the counter. "I've been thinking." "Yeah, no. She nodded. "About what you said, about Emma." I waited. This wasn't a moment to fill the silence. "I should have said something," Denise said. Her voice was small, not defensive. "I know that." I looked at her then. Really looked. "I don't need you to hate your sister," I said. "I just need you to protect our kid." She swallowed. "I don't know what you're planning." "I'm not planning anything yet," I said. That was mostly true, but whatever happens, it's not going to be loud, and it's not going to be cruel. Denise nodded slowly. "I just don't want this to tear us apart." "Then stand with me," I said, "even if it's uncomfortable." She didn't answer right away, but she didn't say no either. The next morning I drove to the credit union, not because I needed money, but because that's where the old files lived, the ones tied to community accounts and sponsorships that had been rolled over year after year. Viridian Credit Union sat on the edge of town, brick building flag out front snapping in the cold wind. Inside, everything smelled like paper and carpet cleaner. Familiar, safe. Ray was right. The file was there. The agreement matched the copy in my cabinet down to the last period. Nothing altered, nothing missing. The clause was enforceable, boring, solid. As I sat there reviewing it, a memory surfaced. Marla at a church fundraiser 2 years ago, clinking her glass and saying, "We don't let just anyone in here." At the time, I'd ignored it. A joke I'd told myself, just Marla being Marla. I wondered how many lines she'd crossed before anyone bothered to count. On my way out, I ran into Mrs. Dottie Klein in the lobby. She was wrapped in a wool coat that looked older than both of us, combined gray curls poking out from under a knit hat. "Well, if it isn't Tommy Harlan," she said, peering at me over her glasses. "You look like a man carrying a heavy folder." I smiled despite myself. "That obvious?" She leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Your sister-in-law's been flapping her gums again," she said. "You know, for someone who loves charity so much, she sure has opinions about who deserves it." I raised an eyebrow. Dottie snorted. "Honey, I've lived in this town 70 years. Queens always forget the castle belongs to the people who built it." She patted my arm and shuffled off toward the door, leaving me standing there with a strange mix of amusement and resolve. It wasn't just Ray, it wasn't just me. People saw more than Marla realized. That afternoon, I made a decision. I didn't pull the plug, not yet. I sent a formal notice instead, short, neutral, factual. A review of sponsorship components pending due to reported conduct inconsistent with community standards. No accusations, no emotion, just process. Marla called within an hour. "What the hell is this, Tom?" she snapped, skipping any pretense. "I'd suggest reading the agreement," I said evenly. "Page 3. "This is ridiculous," she said. "You're overreacting." "Am I asked. She went quiet just for a second. Then she said, "You're trying to punish me." I looked out the window at the bare trees, their branches black against the sky. "No," I said. "I'm enforcing something you agreed to." "You can't do this," she said. "I already have," I replied. She hung up on me. That night I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Denise breathe beside me. I didn't feel victorious. I felt steady, like a man standing at the edge of something he couldn't step back from. I thought about whether this made me like Marla, whether I was becoming what I despised. Then I thought about Emma, about the way she'd whispered she was okay when she wasn't. This wasn't revenge, it was a boundary finally drawn in ink instead of silence. And once ink dries, it doesn't wash away. The night of the fundraiser arrived with a hard wind and a dusting of snow that looked prettier than it felt. December in Cedar Falls had a way of reminding you who was in charge. The church fellowship hall glowed from the parking lot, windows lit warm against the cold cars lined up neat like people wanted to prove they belonged. Inside the place buzzed. Folding tables were dressed up with white cloths and evergreen centerpieces. Strings of lights looped along the walls. Someone had splurged on real plates instead of paper. The smell of baked ham and scalloped potatoes mixed with coffee and cheap cologne. It was familiar, too familiar. I'd been in this room 100 times for pancake breakfasts, funerals, blood drives, fish fries. Tonight it felt different. Marla stood near the front laughing too loud, holding court like she always did. She wore a black dress that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage hair perfect lipstick untouched. Brent hovered nearby, smiling like a man who assumed everything would go his way if he just waited. Denise and I came in quietly. Emma stayed close to my side, holding my hand the way she had that night at Marla's house. I felt her squeeze my fingers when she spotted her aunt. I squeezed back. People noticed us. I could feel it. Heads turned. Conversations dipped and rose again in hushed waves. "Is that Tom? I heard something happened. Marla's been furious all week." Ray was there standing near the back with a cup of coffee, calm as a fence post. He caught my eye and gave a small nod. Not encouragement. Confirmation. The program started, a few speeches about community, about generosity, about standards. I almost smiled at that one. Then Marla stepped up to the microphone. "Thank you all for coming," she said, voice bright and practiced. "It means so much to see so many familiar faces. This fundraiser is very close to my heart." I listened, but only halfway. My heart thudded steady, not fast. I wasn't nervous, I wasn't angry. I was ready. When Marla started talking about the matching donation, about how some wonderful sponsors made all this possible, I felt the room lean in. This was her moment, the one she'd been waiting for. I stepped forward. I didn't grab the microphone. I didn't interrupt her sentence. I just said her name clear, firm. "Marla." The room went quiet in that strange way it does when people sense something is about to happen, but don't know what yet. Someone dropped a spoon. It clattered against a plate, loud as a gunshot in the silence. Marla turned, irritation flashing across her face before she smoothed it into a smile. "Tom," she said lightly, "we'll talk after." "No," I said, "we won't." I could hear the wind outside rattling the windows. Inside, even the string lights seemed to hum too loudly. "I need to clarify something," I said, speaking to the room, not to her. My voice carried without effort. Years of explaining contracts to stubborn men had taught me how to speak plain and steady. Effective tonight, I continued the sponsorship, and matching funds provided through the Harlan family agreement are being withdrawn. A ripple moved through the crowd. Gasps, whispers. Someone muttered, "What?" Marla's smile cracked. "That's not funny," she said sharply. "It's not a joke," I said. "It's a clause." I pulled a folded paper from my jacket pocket, not to read, but to remind myself it was real. "The agreement tied to this event includes a conduct clause," I said. "It's been there for 15 years. It covers public behavior tied to sponsored gatherings." Marla shook her head, eyes darting around the room. "This is ridiculous. You can't." "On December 17th, I said calmly, at your home, during a gathering tied to this fundraiser, you publicly humiliated a child based on her background." A hush fell so deep I could hear the heater kick on. "That behavior violates the agreement," I said. "So the sponsorship ends tonight." Marla opened her mouth, then closed it. Her face flushed red anger and panic mixing in a way she couldn't hide. "This is personal," she snapped. "You're doing this to get back at me." Ray cleared his throat from the back of the room and took one step forward. "It's standard," he said. "Clause is clear. Enforcement is legal." All eyes swung to him. Ray didn't look impressed by the attention. He just stated a fact and stopped talking. Marla looked around like she expected someone to save her. Brent stared at the floor. Denise stepped closer to me. I felt her hand slide into mine, warm and certain. Then she spoke, quiet but clear enough. "You don't get to talk about our daughter like that," she said. "Not ever." That did it. The room exhaled all at once. Whispers spread like wind through cornfields. A woman near the wall dabbed her eyes. Someone else nodded slowly. Marla's shoulders sagged just for a second before she stiffened again. "This isn't over," she hissed. I met her eyes. "It is." I felt Emma tug my sleeve. I looked down. She wasn't crying. She was standing straight, chin up. "Thank you, Dad," she whispered. That one sentence landed heavier than anything I'd said all night. Marla turned away, face tight, her moment gone. The fundraiser dissolved into awkward clusters and low voices. People avoided her eyes. A few came over to us, quiet words, quick pats on the arm. Ray clapped my shoulder once. "Clean," he said. Outside, the cold air hit my lungs, sharp and honest. Snow crunched under our boots. The wind cut through my coat, but I felt lighter than I had in years. I looked back once at the glowing hall. The lights still shone. The world kept turning. But something important had shifted. The weeks after felt quieter than I expected. Not peaceful, just quieter. Like the sound after a bell stops ringing when your ears are still adjusting. Word traveled fast in Cedar Falls. It always does. By Monday morning, everyone knew Marla's fundraiser had ended early and without its promised match. By Tuesday, the story had softened in some mouths and sharpened in others. Some folks said I'd gone too far. Others said it was about time someone stood up to her. Most just shook their heads and went on with their lives. Marla didn't call again. Brent sent one short email asking if there was any way to resolve this privately. I replied with one sentence. "The agreement is clear. I never heard back." Denise and I moved carefully around each other for a while, like two people learning a new floor plan. We didn't fight. We didn't pretend nothing happened either. One night after Emma went to bed, Denise sat at the kitchen table and stared at her hands. "I thought keeping the peace was love," she said finally. I sat across from her. "Sometimes it is," I said, "but not when it costs your kid her dignity." She nodded, eyes wet. I didn't know how to stand up to her. "I know," I said, and I meant it. We started seeing a counselor through the church. Not because everything was broken, but because something important had cracked, and we didn't want to paper over it like we had before. It was awkward at first, honest in a way that made my chest tight, but it was real. Emma noticed the change before either of us said a word. One Saturday morning, we were at Hy-Vee picking up groceries. Denise was comparing cereal prices like always. Emma reached out and grabbed the box she wanted, no glance back, no hesitation. "Is this okay?" she asked. "Yes," Denise said right away. Emma smiled. "Just a small one, but it stayed with me all day." Marla lost more than a fundraiser. The house she loved showing off, the one where the party happened, went back on the market by spring. People said downsizing made sense. People always say that. I didn't feel joy about it. Just a quiet certainty that actions leave marks even when people pretend they don't. One evening, a few months later, Emma and I sat by our own fireplace. Ours popped and crackled louder than Marla's ever did, uneven and honest. She leaned against me, warm and solid. "Dad," she said. "Yeah, kiddo. Thank you for not letting them be mean." I swallowed. "You're worth standing up for," I said, "always." That night after she went to bed, I thought about all the times I'd stayed silent in my life. Times I'd told myself it didn't matter. Times I'd chosen comfort over courage and called it maturity. I know better now. Silence teaches children who they're allowed to be. And boundaries spoken calmly, enforced fairly, are a gift we give the people who come after us. If this story struck a nerve, if you've ever swallowed words to keep the peace or wondered whether standing up would cost too much, I hope it reminded you that dignity is worth protecting. Yours and theirs. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. And if you'd like to hear more stories like this told plain and honest, I hope you'll stick around.